Hi, welcome back to the Benchmarkers Rugby Show. My name is Kumbi, and we've just had one of the best rounds of Six Nations that, at least that I remember, for a long time. We had three massive, entertaining games over the weekend in the fourth round, the penultimate round of the Six Nations. And obviously, for this video, we're going to look at the game between England and Ireland. But we had France versus Wales. Wales was at home. That one was a little bit, it wasn't as close as the other two because France really pulled away at the end. But the first part of that game, that was a very close, very entertaining game. And then you also had another game between Scotland and Italy, where Scotland looked to dominate, but then Italy just like stuck to their paces, stuck to their game plan, and they managed to win that game by two at home. But the most important result coming from the weekend was England versus Ireland, right? Which is debatable. But for me, from my perspective, the reason why I say that is because Ireland had the chance to win the Six Nations over the weekend, right? Had they won this game, they would have gone beyond 5 points, beyond a 5 point difference between them and number two. So England beating Ireland in this game basically keeps it competitive. If Ireland lose the next game and England manage to win, that means they win. Basically, it's up for grabs. The Six Nations is not over just yet, right? So that was why this was a massive result for England, but also was the really impressive result for England. I think if you look at the past few years, this game as well as some of the I think the semi-final performance against South Africa, those are the ones that you kind of pick as well. These are some of the best performances that they had in the last few recent years. So yeah, we're just going to go through this game. We're going to talk about how it played out, what each team did right, what each team did wrong, and what this means going into the last weekend of the Six Nations. Right, so we're just going to start off with the overview of the game. All right, so just look at how the points are scored between each team, and then just we're going to look at the position and territory stats as well. So, like I said, England won the game. They won it 23 points to 22 by 1 point. This was actually 22 points to 20 in the 80th minute in Ireland's favour. But then Marcus Smith, you'll see that there's England scored one drop goal. Marcus Smith got one drop goal in the 82nd, 83rd minute, somewhere there, to win the game. Basically, like a Johnny Wilkinson, even later than Johnny Wilkinson type of situation. So that was a very interesting thing to see. And then, so both teams scored a few tries. So England scored three, Ireland scored two, but the tries were most of the tries were scored close to the touchline. So the conversions were quite hard. So out of the five tries that were scored in the game, only one was converted. And then, interestingly enough, for the penalty goals, so you'd have expected, I think I said this in the last video as well, England is the team that's going to go for posts. Ireland are going to go for the corner, based on how the Six Nations has played out, based on how they even approach the game of the World Cup. They do not go for posts as much as other teams. But in this case, because of England's defense, I think England's defense put them under a lot of pressure, especially in that first half. They went for posts four times, and all four times were in the first half. So that was an interesting thing to see as well. And then just to get into the possession and the territory stats, right? So we've got a game control slide here where we show the possession and the territory in the first and second half, right? So you'll see that England basically won possession and territory, right? So especially territory, if you're just going to focus on that, they had 66% territory in the first half, and then that kind of dropped to 54, which is still dominant. But overall, that gave them a 60% territory win for the game. And just to look at how the game played out in general, I think you know we're going to look at the attacking stats and the set pieces and whatnot coming in the next slide. But basically, England managed to put Ireland under pressure at the beginning. Because of that rush defense that I mentioned, that's one. But two, their attack was also quite good, right? So they had front foot ball, they had quick ball at the ruck. It's a shame we don't have, stats on average ruck time and so on. But their ruck time was quite quick, and because they were managing to get quick ruck time, that put Ireland under pressure on the back foot. And but unfortunately, it looked like England weren't. I mean, England weren't really taking those opportunities in the first half. Basically, despite those territory stats, the dominant territory, the dominant possession, Ireland still managed to get 12 points to 8 ahead at halftime. Right. So for me, when I was watching this game, I'm thinking, okay, this is probably kind of the same. This is going in the same direction as that Wales game between Wales and England, where in the first half, I mean, in this case, they didn't have as many handling errors as they had in that game. but they still didn't take the opportunities. They had a couple of handling errors, yes, but there's a time where they were, close to to the try line, and then they just left the ball out of the ruck, and then Tyburn managed to come and basically take the ball, and Ireland managed to get out. There's a point where Furbank, catches the ball instead of letting it bounce on the floor. He basically catches it and then steps out of the, basically steps out of touch. So it was kind of those mistakes that kept Ireland back in the game, but England was completely dominant, right? So Ireland did manage to score those first four penalties in the first half, and then England, interestingly enough, right? So if you had showed me these stats and said, well, England won territory 60% versus 40% for Ireland, I would have said, okay, what probably happened is that England probably kicked a little bit more and then dared Ireland to run back. Ireland probably tried to run back with like Hugo Keenan, with James Lowe, but I wouldn't have expected the opposite to be true, right? So essentially, what was happening was Ireland were the ones who were kicking, obviously, because they've got like we said in the last video, they've got really good kickers in their back three, guys like James Lowe, guys like Hugo Keenan. Those guys are really good, kickers of the ball, and they're also good under the high ball as well. But England were the ones who were catching the ball more often and then trying to run back, right? So that was an interesting call because I thought because of Ireland's good kicking, England would probably bring in a Freddie Stewart. But the decision to bring in Furbank kind of paid off quite early because they managed to, where Freddie Stewart could have gone for an up and under, Furbank tried to run the ball back. And because of that, they scored, a very early try. I'm forgetting who their number 12. I always space out on names for some reason, but basically they scored on the left touchline, right? So essentially, this game was kind of, if for all the predictions that I'd made, and I know this is not new for this channel, for all the predictions that I'd made, which team was going to kick more, which team was going to run back more, which team was going to have better stats and so on. None of that was true. But essentially, because England wasn't able to take their chances in that first half, because in the few chances where Ireland had the ball, England's discipline wasn't all that great in key areas. Ireland managed to win that first half, and also because they also because eventually with a rush defense, you're gonna get a space somewhere. So if you look at that first, coming into the second half, I think it was Marcus Smith who tried to rush to make a spot tackle. And then just like we said in the previous game, Ireland is a good team when it comes to they I think they've got good personnel when facing that rush defense because they've got people who've got the poise to get that delayed pass out. They've got, guys coming in around the back. They can hit that inside ball runner. Things like that. So in this case, when Marcus Smith tried to rush, basically it was Crowley who just delayed that pass a little bit, and then once Marcus Smith was behind the ball, that's when they made that pass go through the gap, and then I mean England is trying to make that compensate for that for that Marcus Smith, the gap that Marcus Smith created, and by that point James Lowe is already in the corner, so they did manage eventually to get through that rush defense, but I felt like England did well in in regrouping, which they didn't really do well against Wales, right? They regrouped quite well, and then from there they were coming up as a line. They weren't trying to make those like spot tackles like they were trying to do in the first half, and that discipline I think did them quite well. Even though Ireland did score eventually, late in the second half, but that did manage to kind of stagnate Ireland's attack for a large part of that second half. But the attack that I talked about in that first half for England, where they managed to get that quick ball, that was consistent throughout the first half. I mean, throughout the whole game. So because of that, they did manage to score, to keep that scoring, a little bit consistent throughout the game. And ultimately, that's what put them in, in position to win the game. And they ended up getting that drop goal to finish it off. So basically that's how that is a very short summary of how the game played out. But just looking at those stats once again, right? So to look at the key stats of the game, scrum, right? So England managed to get a very good set piece on, right? So we talked about the set piece. We said the set piece would be very critical. They did not lose a single scrum. I think they got a couple of scrum penalties as well on their own ball. Were very impressive against Ireland. So 3 out of 3 for scrums, and then Ireland on the other side, they got 3 out of 5, 60%. So that kind of puts you on on the front foot if you're England, and then also on the lineouts, they had 14 out of 15 lineouts, and then on the other side, Ireland lost 2 of their lineouts, right? So set piece, England did well. That gave them that platform, that contributed to that quick ball that we were talking about from before. And then, right, so obviously that kind of gives platforms to guys like Ben Earl, who had a massive, I think Ben Earl was very impressive. He was personally my, player of the week for Six Nations. But yeah, set piece, England did really well. And then coming into this, to the attacking stats, like I said in the last video, we said, look, Ireland basically is better than England in every single one of these stats. That was not the case in this game, right? So defenders beaten, England wins that 25-18. More meters. The meters are actually really surprising. 522 for England and 243 for Ireland. It kind of contributes. What contributes to this is that England will probably running the ball back a lot more, right? You might also criticize Ireland for having, not as an effective chase because you're giving guys a lot of time to get back until they meet their first defender. So, but anyway, England did much better as far as meters, more handling errors for Ireland. England were far below their average for this tournament so far. They had more offloads because they had that front foot ball. And then kicking meters, Ireland did kick more, right? So it's basically because, like we said, England weren't really kicking as much as we'd have expected. So meters per kick, that meant that England had 26.3. So when they were kicking a lot shorter. And then Ireland, when they were kicking, they had 33.9 meters per kick. So they were kicking a little bit longer, maybe trying to go for that 50-22 and so on. But basically, that's how the attacking went. So England gave themselves a very good platform and that quick ball. And they also have really effective, ball runners as well. Even their forwards, another impressive thing that I also saw was when their forwards were also getting the ball, they were trying to offload a lot more, right? So we had a massive offload. I think it was Sam Underhill offloaded to Itoje, who then, gives the pass out to Furbank, who scored the last try of the game. So, their forwards also had like really silky hands, which was a very impressive thing to see for this game. And then lastly, defensive stats. There's not much, really we can take from the tackles. Obviously, Ireland, because they had less ball, they had more tackles, but both teams were kind of, on the same tackle success rate, really. 87 for England, 86 for Ireland. Maybe you want to get that up. If it's a test match, you want to get it up to like your 90s, but late 80s, I think is good enough. And then the thing that did put, kept Ireland in the game were the penalties, because like we said, those 10 penalties for England versus 8 for Ireland. England did concede these penalties in critical areas, right? So that then gave Ireland the chance to go for 12 points, which, was against the run, basically. And then turnovers won, I think, guys like Van der Fleur, he got a couple of key turnovers. That didn't really matter. I mean, it did matter at the end, but it didn't really get them over the edge, or at least over the line. But these are stats, at least turnovers one would have been a stat that I would have expected England to win, right? Because, they basically have two number sevens in their back row in Ben Earl and Sam Underhill. So I kind of expected this to be in England's favor, but ultimately, maybe it's because England did have more of the ball, so Ireland would have had more chances to get those turnovers. So I don't, so these are things that, maybe you can interpret, differently, but ultimately, these two stats, penalties and turnovers, put Ireland back in the game. They gave them the chance to win it. They were basically winning it in the 80th minute, but because of the other things as well, where England for the whole game put the attack put Ireland on the back foot. Because of that, that's what managed to give them the win at the end. All the points that they scored throughout the game, and from last minute to that last drop goal in the end, basically, I think it is because of that attack. I think their scheme worked quite well against Ireland. So, yeah, so that was a very interesting one. And if you're a rugby fan, if you're neutral like me, this is you're happy with this result because this means that this weekend is going to be a lot more competitive, right? So Ireland, of course, they're still ahead, but they play Scotland, who are a very good team, a team that wants to kind of compensate for their last loss against Italy. I think they're going to be dangerous. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this weekend plays out. England plays France, then you've got Wales versus Italy. Wales still hasn't won a single game. I predicted that, by the way. I think that's the only thing that I haven't. But obviously, there's still a chance for me to get that prediction wrong. But yeah, if obviously we're going to be watching for the weekend, and yeah, hopefully you all enjoy that last weekend of the Six Nations. It's going to be really exciting. But until then, please do like the video, comment, give any contribution that you'd, as far as just, whatever you think I would have missed out on, anything that you found interesting in this game, and then subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, please. All right. But yeah, until then, thank you so much for watching, and you'll see you in the next video.
At Start Experience.